Hello, my beautiful lovelies. Today we're going to talk with the beautiful Miss Nikki Schaefer. She is a yoga teacher and life coach. I met her taking my first class at Shift Yoga Studio in Sylvan Lake, and it really changed my life going there. She's been a role model in my life ever since, and now she is also my life coach. So I wanted to get her take on being a busy working mom and how yoga has impacted her mental and physical health and her parenting through her journey. So let's hear from her. All right, so I thought we could start off with an introduction, a little bit about your background and how you got into yoga.
All right. Well, my name is Nikki Schafers. I live just outside of Calgary in Red Deer, or not Red Deer anymore, Airdrie, Alberta. And I am a mom of two almost teenage boys. Um, I'm a life coach, a yoga teacher, a consultant. And my yoga journey really started around age 30. I started practicing yoga just for the physical aspect of it. They were having classes at my local gym, and the studio owner bribed me to go to class. She's like, just go to class, you'll love it. And I argued with her. I was like, no, it's not for me. Like, I like to sweat. I like to know that I'm like working out. And anyway, long story short, she convinced me and I went, and I remember leaving that day and I had never felt anything like what I was experiencing. And I was just instantly hooked to the physical practice of yoga. And just through that physical practice, I started to learn more about the lineage of yoga, the limbs of yoga. And I, gosh, I was just a student for a really long time. And then I took my first yoga teacher training when I was 34. And it just took me down a path and a journey that I never could have imagined. And it just led me down a road of personal development and coaching.
So it took you basically 4 years to decide that you wanted to do the teacher training. Like, what made you decide you wanted to do the teacher training?
I actually was really scared to do a teacher training. There were people who, of course, came to me and said, like, you would love this, it's right up your alley. And I just kept saying, no, no. And it really came down to I was really afraid to public speak. The thought of standing up in front of a group of people would make me just completely freeze. And so there were there were a few times I had an opportunity and I just said no. And then a teacher um, I met in September of 2015. Actually, she came to our studio and she did a workshop, and she announced that she was doing a teacher training. And then all of a sudden, there was a teacher training in our studio that I was practicing at, and I just thought, this is a really good opportunity for me to move past this fear of public speaking. And so it's the reason why I signed up. Is because I was like, I'm ready to get over this fear. And I was never going to be a yoga teacher. Like, it wasn't something that was my intention before we started. Um I just knew that I had some stuff that I wanted to work through, and so that's what had me sign up. And through the process, I just uncovered so many things about myself and what I had to contribute in the world and what I had to offer. And I just went with it.
I love that. Actually, there's a couple people in my yoga teacher training. That's the reason that they took it as well, was to get over that fear of speaking in front of people. So it must be a common thing.
Yeah. And, the longer I used to wait, the more anticipation it would build, the more fear I would experience. And then somebody really wise once shared with me that, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between whether you're excited or whether you're nervous. And so I started to just tell myself, like, oh, you're just really excited. And actually, someone recently just shared with me that, when you're nervous, it's such a good thing because it means you have something to contribute.
Oh, I love that. It's just like that reframing the situation in a more positive light, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So was this before or after you had your kids? Did you have your kids after you came to yoga, or you came to yoga after you had your kids?
I had just had my second son, and I was practicing. Um, I I feel like I started with a DVD. It wasn't even actual yoga class. It was like yoga poses into a workout, and that's what I was doing at the time. And my son would have been he wasn't even a year old yet. And then when I started practicing in a studio, he had just turned 1, and my oldest son was 3 at the time.
Awesome. So obviously you were taking action in a time where a lot of moms are kind of stuck in that like, how do I make time for myself?
Mhm.
Which I this brings me to a question that I had written down, and that was probably the most important question for this whole interview is how do you create balance between your mom life and being there for your kids and prioritizing yourself? Because that's like the biggest, I think, block for people is I don't have the time.
Mhm. It's a great question, and I think that it's really different for everyone. What worked for me was signing up for a regular class once a week. It was Monday nights, and I just knew that that was going to be my hour. I got a babysitter, I committed to it. It was just once a week, and I went. And I was really lucky that I had the support around me. My in-laws were so great that if my husband wasn't home, they would take the boys so I could just go and have that hour. And then, as the kids got older, I practiced with them. You know, they would roll out their little mats, and I mean, we moved our bodies, and it was something that we could do together. And that's really what my yoga practice was for like a few years, was just fitting it in I could when I could do that.
I love how you said just starting with once a week. I'm reading this book right now, Atomic Habits, which atomic basically means like really small changes. And it's like instead of overwhelming yourself by being like, okay, I'm going to be at the gym 5 times a week, going from something to that kind of commitment. And then there's a pretty good chance of failure, but just saying, look, I'm going to do this once a week and I'm going to make sure that I show up that one time a week. I think that makes it like easier to build that success ladder. Uh,
Yeah.
it's a little less intimidating then.
Yeah, like something that I work with my clients is like, are your goals attainable? Are they tangible? Because if we have this like huge gap between where we are and where we want to be, we get started, and then, eventually like something happens, or you know, your schedule gets interrupted, or like there's something happens, and then we just like it's easy to just like give up. But
Yeah.
like committing to like once a week was something that I could do. It was tangible, and I just looked forward to it every week, when you have little ones at home.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking the first time I did Yin, how relaxing it was. I was like, I really like this for being a mom. Like, there's not very many times in your day where you get to be this relaxed without any.
Yeah. Yeah, it just it gave me such a deep appreciation just for like my own time. And no one prepares you for what it's going to be like when you have little kids. Like nothing anyone says to me was going to prepare me for what that was like. So it was really, really nice to be able to commit to something that was my own.
I love that. And like obviously, as you said, every kid is different, but um, when you practiced with your kids and you started kind of making that something you did together, how did you go about that? Because I think that's a really great idea. It's something my niece likes to do with me, but my son isn't really into it. So I'm
Hmm.
curious, like, how did you fit that to be something that they liked?
Well, they would mimic. what I did, and it was maybe like 5 or 6 minutes, like, it didn't last long, and then they would go and play, and I mean, it was very interrupted.
Yeah.
My kids are older now, and I always still extend the invitation. I'm like, "Do you wanna practice?" And they're 11 and 13 now, and, of course, that the answer is no, but for a little while when they were little, like, I could get them to, practice a few poses and or breathe. Um, one of my I met a mom in my oldest son's kindergarten class, and she would always use this really cute technique with her daughter where when she would get really frustrated, she would say, "Okay, smell the flowers, blow out the candle." I don't know if you've ever heard that, but I would practice that with them, and they would just get into the physicalness of their breath, when they would get overwhelmed or, we were having timeouts.
I love that. I'll have to try that with Makai because
Mhm. Yeah, you just take a deep breath in, tell them to smell the flowers, blow out the candle. You do that a couple times and, they start to calm down.
I love that, especially because like, that long deep breath out is that's with your, like, nervous system that tells you to chill out, right?
Yeah.
The non-scientific way of saying it.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't have to, give them a yoga lesson, you could just make it simple, meet them where they're at, breathe smell the flowers, blow out the candle, I like that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's fun incorporating yoga with kids because it's really like fine motor skills,
Mhm,
breath work, quiet. You can do like little mantras with touching your fingers. You can invite in like song. It's really play.
mhm. It's just kind of adapting it to where they're at that
Totally.
comes into it. Um, any, like, yoga teachers that are specific to kids yoga that you researched or anything like that? I know there's a couple people that in my teacher training that just work with kids, but I've never even looked into that alley.
You know what? I would have to say no. I haven't studied with any specific kids yoga teachers. I have a small amount of training with kids. And it's not something that I ever pursued. Like, I've taught little kids through my son's school when they were little.
Mhm.
Um, but that was it. Like, even like at my own yoga studio, we had a teacher who she loved teaching kids, and so she would always teach them. And I'm not even sure if she still teaches kids.
Any takeaways from that experience that could be little, like, mom hacks throughout the day other than the breathe?
Hmm.
Oh,
Gosh, mom hacks. I think the best thing we can do as moms with kids and yoga is to like take our own timeouts. Like, take our own breaks, feel your feet on the floor, take a deep breath, regroup, get centered. It's easy to get thrown off when you're a mom in moments where you're frustrated or tired, and yeah, it's I think it's really great for us to get centered, and then we can be there for our kids.
I love that. That kinda leads me into my next questions, especially since you came into yoga after you had your kids. Did you find that, like, your reactivity and the way you would have dealt with them before changed over the years because of your practice? And if so, how do you think it changed?
Yeah, I would say that as I began to practice yoga on a deeper level and just becoming aware of how I was showing up as a human and how I was showing up for the people around me and being more aware of, the words I spoke or whether I was in reaction or response to what was happening in that moment. And the more I started to become more aware, I became more clear that I wanted to be more patient with my kids. I wanted to slow down and take my time, and that was built over years. Like I think like you know I was a yeller. Like I yelled at my kids. That's how I got them to do things when they were little. and
Yeah.
yeah, and now I look at it like I would get into reaction to like because I wanted something to be different than it was in that moment. And
Mm.
anytime we're fighting against reality, like we're bringing like we're causing ourselves to suffer. And so I would just say like is this worth suffering over? If there's toys all over my house or there's dishes everywhere, like is it worth getting like reactive about? And so I just learned to bring more ease into my way of being, which brought more peace into our lives. And of course, it happened over time.
Yeah. Definitely you don't just flick a switch.
You do not flick a switch, and it does not work that way. There are still days where, like, you know, my kid. I mean, my oldest is a teenager, and anyway, that's a whole other interview story. But yeah, it's just like it really starts with us and how we want to show up and who we want to be.
I love that. That leads me to two questions actually. So specifically to this example you just said about um reacting and like every time you react to your world, you're causing your own suffering. It's kind of funny you brought that up because I had this conversation with Lakai on the way to school this morning because he, just like me, is an argue everything kid. If I said the wall was white, he would say it was black, kind of thing. So I was just asking, like, what do you get out of, you know, reacting and resisting everything? Like, does it make you feel happy or sad? And he's like, well, it makes me mad and stuff like that. And I'm just wondering, um, how do you talk about this kind of mindset thing with your children? Like, do you find that it comes up and you have to talk to them and you try and think about it like the way you would talk to yourself as you reparent yourself?
Yeah, like we both my husband and I have got into the practice of like asking our kids questions and not assuming we know what's going on with them.
Hmm.
And the more we ask questions, then they tend to share more. And we're able to have a conversation rather than a yelling match.
I love that.
Mhm.
And do you find that they kind of appreciate that more? Because they've probably seen you guys grow as well through your practice over the years. Um, do you find that it's easier to talk with them and stuff now versus like even like 3 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my oldest is 13 and he will ask us. Like I was having a really I would say hard day about a month ago and I was crying and my oldest son asked me like what was up and I shared with him. I was like I'm very transparent with my kids when I'm going through something because I want them to know that it's good to talk about it. And I shared with him what was going on and he said to me, "So how does that make you feel?" And inside I was like, "I love it because he is like asking me a question so that we can have a conversation about it." And so it wears off on them. Our kids mimic the things that they learn. And so we have some pretty great conversations at our dinner table.
I love that. That's beautiful. So my second part of the question that came from that is we're talking a lot about mindset and our actions and the words that we speak. And this is a discussion about yoga. So I'm thinking a lot of people watching this are thinking, they're not even talking about yoga. Yoga is when you just bend yourself into a pretzel. What's going on? So can you speak to that? Because I think that's something that needs to be debunked for a lot of people.
Yeah. Asana is one small part of a yoga practice, and it's great because, I mean, when you're in your body, I mean, anyone who can breathe is practicing yoga, and there's just so much more to it, and it really starts with the yamas and niyamas, which you are so great at sharing, Letitia, and it really starts with, like, getting present with where, well, for me, where are you? Like, get present, find your breath. Where are you putting your attention? Concentrating, taking that time to be in stillness and in that quiet time. And really, I find that yoga is the practice of yoga is a lifestyle. And I mean, it's like a mountain that like you'll never get to. There's just so much out there to learn and to study. And um, it's just a practice, like an everyday practice of a lifestyle.
100%. And it's like that journey will never end. I think that's so true.
Yeah, it doesn't end. You never arrive.
Yeah, it's like there's always a new layer to peel back, but
Mhm.
also life is happening as you're growing. So even when you overcome some other thing that's in the past, there's still things in the future to overcome. So
Absolutely. And I feel like it's why it's so important to practice gratitude and to celebrate like those small steps in your life and not just the milestones.
yes, not always being striving to arrive kind of
Mhm.
thing. Like even if you like say your practice was starting once a week, it's like actually celebrating the fact that you showed up to that class, even
Mhm.
if it's only
Yes.
once a week. It's like, yes, I might have
Yeah.
felt like I wanted to run to the exit door 15 minutes in, but I still went to my mat.
Yeah. Acknowledging yourself for what it took to get there
Hmm.
and acknowledging the people who helped you get there.
I love that. Um, I think I'll end off for with like one last question, which is what are some of the small habits that you've cultivated that you think are the most powerful in loving yourself, but also, like you said, that's one of the key things for being a mom, but as a parent, like having that patience and that understanding for your child.
Hmm. Some things that I have that are part of my daily practice is that I meditate. Even if it's for 5 minutes, if I only have 5 minutes, I will sit in stillness. Um, I also, oh, it just came to me and then I lost it. It might come back. Oh, not sure where it went. Um, One of the things though I think is really powerful is to like not apologize for asking for what you need. Um, is a really big form of self love for me. Not apologizing for when you need your own time or when you make requests, or just acknowledging yourself that um, that really like you're the most important person in your life, and when you're healthy and happy, the people around you are healthy and happy.
100%. Like the opposite side of that, I think, is a lot of people are like self sacrificing and then
Hmm.
they're like, um, they are mad at the other people.
Hmm.
No, resentful. That's the word I'm looking for. They have a little bit of
Hmm.
resentment because they're like, I'm giving all of myself away. But it's like
Hmm.
that's the best one I think too is being able to put yourself first and not feeling guilty about it. So
Hmm.
many women, I don't know if it's just like a stronger thing in women because we're empathetic or what is that's about, but a lot of women I think struggle with
Hmm.
feeling okay with putting themselves first without having that weird resistance coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that, and, it's so important that we put ourselves first.
How long did it take you to come to that clarity, and do you still struggle with it ever?
When I had kids, I was very fortunate that I was the last person out of all of my friends to have kids, and so they all had their stories to share with me. So I did always put myself first with my kids. Um, but I would feel guilt after. And so my work was to, not feel the guilt for it and saying like I need this, I need an hour, I'm going to have a bath or I'm going for a walk or and then just giving myself that time and practicing not feeling guilty for it because that is another part of it
Mhm.
is feeling that mom guilt.
So how do you not feel guilty? Do you, like, replace, the guilt with something else, or, like, how did you kind of overcome that?
Well, guilt is for me was just a belief I had was about like, well, I don't believe that I deserve this time or I shouldn't put myself before my kids because that would be selfish. So it's really getting over the belief behind what you're doing for me is what caused the guilt. So it's a practice and being self-aware of when um when that's coming up for me.
So the guilt is, like, the feeling is, like, the signal that something's there, and then you kind of,
Mhm.
like, inquire till you figure out what that is, like, what's
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, I feel guilty today because I went and I don't know, went shopping or, it's a belief that for me that, oh, I shouldn't be shopping. I should be tending to my kids or
Yeah,
we tend to make up stories, especially when we're tired because we're sleep deprived.
yes. Well, I think especially when like, growing up, maybe that was, like, the beliefs our parents had too and stuff, so it, like, subconsciously shows up in our life without us even realizing it.
Yeah, so many of our habits are in our subconscious and we don't even know that we're doing them. So, yeah, it's good to pay attention.
Awesome. I think this is so good of a conversation and so needed. Um, can I put your information at the end of the video for anyone who
Yeah.
wants to work with you or take any of your classes?
Yeah, absolutely. And um, you can find me on Instagram for Nikki Schafers, and my website's nikkischafers.com. But yeah, absolutely.
Yay. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about this. And